Hello guys, so today ZeniMax dropped some information on the upcoming racial changes that we're going to see in the Q1 for this year, so the first update that we'll see this year. And there's some big changes here. They're going to have a big impact on the races. So what is ZeniMax focusing on the changes for the races here? Right now, there are a lack of effective options in picking your race and class combinations. Another concern was there are too many racial bonuses that do not have universal applicability. Not every race provides a completely unique gameplay element, and some races provide far more mathematical combat power than others. So these are kind of the key sore points that ZeniMax was wanting to address about the races. So we're going to go over the changes, and I'm going to talk about my thoughts about these changes here. So the first one we're going to take a look at is High Elf. The first racial abilities received no changes, and these just really affect experience gain and it's kind of one other generic function. So we're not going to see any change to these ones here. So the first thing that's changing is Spell Charge, and this is changed to restore 575 magicka or stamina based on whichever is higher after activating a class ability. This can occur once every 6 seconds, and it also reduces the damage that we take by 5% when we're using an ability with a channel or cast time. So a big change here from going from the percent increase to magicka recovery to instead restoring a base amount of magicka or stamina when we use a class ability. This change is really nice because it's going to help alleviate a couple things. Number one, it's going to be better for stamina builds because stamina builds are going to be able to utilize more magicka or even stamina sustain from this passive now, depending on what they need. The second thing that this is going to do is also help reduce the impact that we see of the power creep in this game, where things are getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and something like a percent increase to your recovery is part of the problem that we have with power creep. So by making this a flat value, they can help better fine-tune what things are going to look like at the higher end scale things of like a high-end magicka recovery build. So I really like these changes for those reasons. Now, Gift of Magnus has been changed from 10% max mag to increase your max magicka by 2,000. For a high-end max magicka build, this is yet again a nerf. We go from a percent to a flat value, addressing that power creep. And for a stamina build or a magicka build that has less max magicka, this should be a buff for you. Stamina build especially because now we have more base max mag to work with, which will essentially play into the sustain for things like PvP stamina builds that need to use a lot of magicka abilities as well. Now, Elemental Talent has yet again been changed from a percent increase to your elemental damage to just a flat increase to your spell damage. I actually really like this change because this is going to nerf, yet again, the power creep, but on top of it, this is going to address things like Valken Scoria, Torix Pact, and stuff like that. They're not going to hit as hard, so they're going to see a little bit of a nerf as well, and those are essentially proc set things. So I like this change because it emphasizes your race choice more for the abilities that you use on your build, as opposed to maybe the sets that you're running, and that, in my mind, is going to open up a little bit more flexibility. Now, the shift to spell damage here, I do really like because it will provide an increase in healing as well. So I do think that the changes to High Elf in general have been focused around making a Stamina High Elf more viable while giving Magicka High Elf the tools it needs to feel like a Magicka specialized class at the same time. So I do really like these changes because they've kind of achieved the goals that ZeniMax was looking for. Now, Argonian is the next one we're going to take a look at, and this is the one that on the live server, everyone's running Argonian for that big boy sustain in PvP. And this is the one that people think needs to be nerfed. So the first big change is 3% max magicka and 4,600 health mag stam when we drink a potion, down to 3,600 health mag stam when we drink the potion. This is a big change. I actually think this is over a 25% nerf, so a big change in this passive to nerf it quite a bit. We'll see how it plays out and stacks against the other races which have been changed as well. Now, the resource gain of max magicka to the flat 1,000. This should be a buff for most builds, I think, except for very high-end max mag builds. For the most part, this will be a buff. So I do like this change, and yet again, this will be a buff for things like stam builds. Now, the resistance has been changed from max health and poison resistance to 1,000 max health, and instead of poison resistance, we now have disease resistance only, and we are immune to the disease status effect. So a huge nerf in the max health for pretty much every build, and that's a theme we'll see in these changes, is that a lot of max health has been nerfed in this coming patch, and the disease immunity is a huge deal for things like PvP, I think, being immune to a status effect, I think, is a little bit underrated. So we're going to see how these play out in things like PvP. I think this will be very handy, though, because we do see a lot of people running Disease Enchants in PvP. And we have the increased resistance as well. Now, the Quick to Mend has been changed from healing done and healing received to only 4% healing done. So a bit of a nerf to the healing that Argonian gets. So in general, I think Argonian took quite a few nerfs. Argonian was very flexible before, and it's still going to be flexible in this coming patch. It's just going to be a little weaker than it was in the previous patch. So it will be interesting to see if people stick with their Argonians and how they match up to the other races that have been changed as well. Now, taking a look at Wood Elf, we've got Y'ffre's Endurance for 21% stam recovery, changed to a base 258 stam recovery. Yet again, we're getting that percent changed into a base value. 258 is a huge amount of stam recovery, so lower end stam recovery builds and Magicka builds will see a huge buff in their stam sustain, but things like high sustain stam builds like 2k plus stam recovery will see a little bit less stamina recovery in their builds. So I think that this is a good change to kind of alleviate the power creep while still giving those bonuses yet again to a variety of specs instead of just the stamina focused Wood Elf. Now this next passive has been changed to increase the max stam by 2,000 and give you that more chunky poison resistance and immunity to the poison status effect. Like I had mentioned, the status effect immunity is kind of underrated. Poison is one of the most common status effects you see, especially in PvP. So this will have a big impact, I think, for PvP, at least for the Wood Elf. It'll be nice. And then the max stam getting changed from the percent over to 2,000 max stam. This should be probably a buff for most builds. Most builds will see a little bit more max stam than they had before. Some builds might not. But most builds should, and this is going to be great for the mag builds yet again. Now, Stealthy has been changed from reducing the radius that you can be detected by to instead increasing the radius that you can detect others. So instead of making you stealthier, it makes it easier for you to see opponents, and now the roll dodge has been changed to a 20% movement speed for 3 seconds, and we've lost the 10% stealth damage. Now, the 10% stealth damage loss I don't think is so bad because this only really affects gank builds, and gank builds can hit super hard anyway. They don't need this 10% bonus in order to hit their hard ganks. So this change is all right by me, but this change to roll dodge, man, this is going to give a 20% movement speed bonus that is not major or minor expedition. So it's going to stack with other kinds of movement speed bonus off a roll dodge. So all you need to do is equip a bow and roll, and you'll get that movement speed bonus. This is going to be absolutely huge. I think this is going to be too strong. I don't think that we'll stick with the 20% here. I think ZeniMax will change this, and if they don't, I'll be pretty surprised. My big issue with it is that it will be really easy to build a high-speed build on a Wood Elf that you don't have to give up nearly as much for versus building it on any other class. So it does give that unique feel to Wood Elf, but I think 20% is a bit much because think about things like Speedy Mistform. This could get way out of hand. Now, taking a look at Breton. Breton, in my opinion, has been a race that doesn't really shine simply because it has been outperformed by things like a High Elf or even a Dark Elf. So they've made some changes to Breton, I think, to make it a little bit more attractive and give it some versatility as well. 10% max mag switched to 2k. We talked about this before. Power creep getting addressed here. The spell resist is getting reduced to 2,310, and now we're getting 100 mag recovery. So a little bit more mag sustain here, but a little bit less chunkiness on the Breton. So we're going for a bit of that sustain. This will be nice for the stam builds, I think, too. But we're seeing less bulk on the Breton than we did before. The big change that Breton got is a 3% Magicka cost reduction to 7% Magicka cost reduction, and this will affect all your Magicka abilities, so even things like a stamina build in PvP will benefit a lot from the reduced cost on the Magicka skills. I think that this change is nice for Breton because it makes it a great option for like a good sustain Magicka build, but it also gives you great options for a stamina build as well, better at least than we saw in the previous patch. But Breton, in my mind, is still not going to shine as a race. I still feel like it's going to be outperformed by some of the other races. Now, taking a look at the Dark Elf, we have got some massive changes to the Dark Elf, guys. Dynamic, 6% max stam and mag, switched to 1,250 max stam and Magicka. So for most builds, I think that this is going to be a nerf. For a stamina or magicka build, you'll see a little bit less max stat, but for a hybrid Dark Elf, this could potentially be a bit of a buff. And that's really interesting for me because I actually like playing hybrids, so I'm really excited about this kind of flat stat change for things like the hybrid Dark Elf. And this, of course, is to alleviate that power creep. The Resist Flame has been changed to increase your max health by 600 now and give you flame resistance and immunity to the burning status effect. Like we said, the status effects are very strong, and having immunity, I think, is going to be pretty cool. And burning is the most common status effect in PvP, so I think that this is going to be a great passive for that reason. The flame resistance is nice too because flame damage is the most common style of damage outside of physical or magical in PvP as well. And then on top of it, we get some max health, and we're losing the max mag here. So this is yet again, we're not seeing a focus on magicka for the Dark Elf this time, but we're seeing it dumped into health instead. And this is to alleviate that power creep as well. And then the Destructive Ancestry got some big changes. None of the percent damage to elementals. Instead, we get an increase to weapon and spell damage by 258. So these changes to Dark Elf are very, very interesting because especially a hybrid Dark Elf is going to benefit huge from these changes. And a magicka or stamina Dark Elf is going to be great. Dark Elf in general is going to be a damage dealing race now. And I think that's very interesting because in the past we've had what's a good magicka DD, what's a good stam DD. Well, now you have Dark Elf, which is just going to be a good DD. And we're going to see that theme as well when we take a look at some of the other races. So I actually really love the changes to Dark Elf, and I'm really excited to play my Dark Elves this coming patch. Now, taking a look at Imperial, we've got 12% max health to 2,000. This is probably a nerf for most builds. Yeah. A lot of cuts to max health. Imperial is actually the only one that maintains over 1,000 to the max health, so it still gets a bit, but still big cuts to the max health. We've got a change from conditioning to increase your stamina by a flat 2,000 now. This is probably going to be about the same for your build depending on what your max stam's sitting at. High-end max stam, a nerf. Low-end max stam, a buff. Great for things like a magicka Imperial because they'll have a bigger max stam pool. And then Red Diamond has had some pretty big changes. 10% chance on melee attack to heal for 6% of max health changed to when you deal direct damage, you have a 15% chance to heal for 1750 and reduce the cost of block and bash by 5%. So very interesting change here, I think, because we have direct damage instead of melee damage. That is a significant difference because now an Imperial with staves, for example, will be able to get that Red Diamond passive. So things like an Imperial kind of like Sap Health Nightblade is going to be viable now where it wasn't really before, and you can do that with the staff. So I really like this change because it yet again stresses that we'll be able to have a bit more variety with the race that we've picked, and Imperial is going to be able to do that. The reduced cost of block and bash is kind of the unique thing that Imperial's getting. It's not super unique feeling, but at least it's not Breton, man. Now taking a look at Khajiit. Khajiit got some pretty interesting treatment as well. So Robust has been changed to increase the health recovery by 100 and mag and stam by 75. The amount of recovery that you're getting in general, I think, is going to be an overall nerf compared to what we have here. 20% health recovery getting cut down by quite a bit, but that's what we're going to see for health recovery and max health. It's taking huge nerfs in this coming update. So there you go. The stam recovery is going to be less as well, but it's also split between stam and magicka. So this change here, yet again, emphasizing whether you want to go stam or mag. It gives you the flexibility and a little bit more options, as well as taking away that power creep from percent stats as well. Now, Stealthy has been changed yet again. We're losing the crit damage and the detection, and instead we are gaining max health, magicka, and stamina with the new Lunar Blessing. And this is just a flat stat increase. Yet again, focusing on a variety approach. You can go magicka or stamina or even hybrid. And then Carnage has instead been changed from weapon critical chance to be both weapon and spell critical chance. So I actually really like the changes to Khajiit because, like Dark Elf, it is now going to be a damage dealer. It doesn't focus in magicka or stamina. It's a variety damage dealer. So I really enjoy this change. I think it's really cool, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of builds we come up with, especially because of this crit here. A crit hybrid is something I've always wanted to do, and this is making Khajiit look very attractive. And then, of course, Khajiit gets the reduced stealth detection radius by 5% as well. So we still get to have that reduced stealth detection radius. We get that unique feel that Khajiit has. So I think that's pretty interesting there. So taking a look at Nord as well got some pretty big changes. The first big one is Stalwart. We no longer get the percent increase to our max stam and health recovery. Instead, we get a flat increase of 1,500 max stam. This is probably a nerf for most builds. It could be a buff if you run a lower stam, max stam build. For mag builds, this will be a buff, giving you more max stam pool than you had before. And then when you take damage, you gain 5 ultimate, and this can occur once every 10 seconds. This is really cool. I can see Nord Dragon Knight being very cool. I really like this change because it's very lore friendly. Nord's like that battle spirit fighter, so the increased ultimate gen fits right into that. So it's really, really cool in my opinion that they've thrown this on Nord. And it's going to open up a cool variety of builds yet again. And you can take advantage with this, of course, with a Magicka or Stamina build. So stressing yet again the options that you have. The Resist Frost has been changed to increase our max health by 1,000 instead of the 9% max health, so a big cut to the max health yet again. And then our Cold Resistance has been buffed a bit, and we are immune to the Chilled status effect. Chilled is the least common status effect you see in PvP, so this won't have as big an impact as some of the other immunities, but the Cold Resistance is going to be, well, yet again, not the best, because that's only really going to affect Wardens. This we'll have to wait and see what Necro is going to be running to see if Cold Resistance has a big impact on PvP. If Necro has a lot of Frost skills, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, taking a look at the Rugged passive, 6% damage reduction, changed over to 3,960 physical spell resist. Now, the way it works on the live server, this 6% damage reduction is not actually 6%. It's more like around 3% depending on your build. This has been changed to just be flat added value to your resists, which this is around 7% damage reduction. So it's a bit of a buff to your bulkiness and in the number wise here, but on top of it, you're actually getting that full 7% instead of just a part of it from this percentage reduction here. So this in general, I think will make Nord bulkier. I think that Nord will feel bulkier in this coming patch than it does right now. So I'm kind of excited to see that change come in. On my Nord, they're losing the health recovery, but they're getting that increased resist. So we're going to see how we feel. We're going to be more resistant to things like burst, but we won't have the recovery. And now taking a look at the Orc, guys, Brawny has been changed from 6% max health and stam to increase your max health and stam by 500. Big nerf here for every build. So we see a big nerf to the max stat on the Orc. Unflinching has been changed to increase your healing received by 4% instead of 5%. So a little bit of a nerf to healing received. And then when we deal damage with the weapon ability, we restore health and stamina. So what we kind of lose for our health recovery here, we make up for restoring some health with our weapon attacks, and we add some stamina recovery as well. So something I really want to note about this is it says weapon ability. This is going to include staves and your physical melee weapons and bows. So you'll be able to take advantage of this at a distance with a Magicka or stamina build and restore that stamina and health. So I think this adds an interesting kind of flair and some sustain to Orc for both a mag and stam spec. Swift Warrior has been changed to increase the weapon damage by 258 instead of that 4% melee attack bonus. Yet again, focusing on stamina based builds. However, it's not just melee builds, so a little bit more variety open up there while focusing on the fact that Orc is going to have that high weapon damage. And sprint speed and sprint cost has not been changed. And finally, guys, we have got Redguard. And Redguard is getting some really big changes as well. I actually think the Redguard changes are another set that is very interesting, so let's go over it. Acceleration is 9% stam recovery. This is being changed to reduce the cost of our weapon abilities by 8%. Yet again, this is weapon abilities, so this will be both Magicka and stamina. Your staff, your sword and board, your weapon abilities will be reduced. Will this affect ultimate? I don't know. If it does, that will be very interesting. Like a Sork Redguard casting the Resto ult will have very cheap Resto ults, so it should be very cool to see something like that if it does affect ultimate. But the big change that we see here is the removal of that percent kind of creep on our stats and just a flat cost reduction off the 8% there. And it helps both Magicka and stamina builds. Yet again, focusing on building variety for this race. Now, the next change we have is 10% max stam switched over to 2,000 max stam. We talked about this. We're getting rid of the power creep. This will be a nerf for higher end stam builds, a buff for everything else, and mag builds. Adrenaline Rush is being changed as well. When we deal direct damage, we now restore 950 stamina as opposed to 792. So restoring more stamina off Adrenaline Rush, and on top of it, it is now direct damage and it is not melee attack. So we can take advantage of this passive yet again with things like a staff out. We don't need to be a stamina build to take advantage of the sustain from this, and we don't need to be using melee attacks. So Redguard got some really interesting changes just because of this kind of weapon ability cost reduction. Redguard in general was very stamina focused before, so I really like the changes to it because it opens up running a Magicka build on a Redguard very effectively. So very, very cool change there. So in general, guys, there are a lot of changes with these upcoming racial passives, and I don't know. I kind of like them. I'm really excited to see how they'll function in game. I'm looking forward to how they look. I'm looking forward to the variety. As someone who plays a lot of builds, I really like the changes that go in the direction of opening up that build variety without you having to go and race change. So very interesting. Now, as for the kind of like special things that they wanted each race to kind of have to make it feel unique, I think that they did a good job with it. They have some that are a little lacking, like Breton, you know, I don't know, Breton's just Breton. But what I am concerned about is the Wood Elf with the 20% movement speed. I had mentioned it when we talked about the Wood Elf, and I think that's going to be a bit much. We'll see what ZeniMax does and how it plays out when it hits the live server, but I think that's going to overperform a bit, in my opinion. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about these patch notes, so please, please, please let me know what you think. If you guys enjoyed this stream, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to see gameplay from me, you can always check out my Twitch channel. Link, of course, to that is in the description. And finally, guys, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They are a VPN for gamers. They can give you better ping to your favorite games. So if you guys have bad ping and you want to try it out, it's free to try. No harm, no foul. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.